Anna, can you hear me? Are you still there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. I show that we're on YouTube now. So,
You're the host now.
okay. Sounds good. Thanks for your help this morning. I appreciate it. Good morning, Mr. Lee. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Judge?
I sure can. Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Morning, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, sir?
I'm very good.
Good. We have hearing examiner Ryan joining us now.
Good morning, Judge.
He's just getting his headphones.
He's just a quiet man.
Yeah. Sort of.
You're on mute, Judge.
Yeah, hey, that got it.
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect.
Can
There we
hear you just
go.
fine. All right.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we've got we have about 20 minutes before we get started. Mr. Lee, thank you for sending us the real-time link. I've got it pulled up here. No issues there.
You may have noticed I sent it at 1:30 this morning.
I did notice that. Yeah.
Well, it takes some time to get prepared even for something as short as this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
All right. This is prime nicotine time, and I'm going to take advantage of it.
Okay, sounds good, sir. We'll see you in about 20 minutes.
You got it.
Hearing examiner Ryan, I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay.
All good.
All right. Got another 5 minutes to go. I think we have probably just about everybody we need in the waiting room already, so I'll probably let them in here in another minute or so. Mr. Lee, are you with us?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, perfect. All right. I'm just going to let everybody in and they can do mic checks and all that and make sure we're on track because I show all the attorneys and I think both of the witnesses. So I think we should be good.
Yeah, it's interesting. See, here's my light is on, and here my light is off. It makes somewhat of a difference, because I get the window that's to the left,
Yeah.
and your one side of me is shiny.
Yeah. Yeah. That does make a difference.
It's your best side, though.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Mr. Padilla?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
You always have nice bolos on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a handful, but I never wear them. I need to start.
Yeah, you should get into it.
It's that New Mexico look. I'm wearing jeans with boots on right now. Don't let the tie fool you.
There you go. There you go. Anybody need to do a mic check before we get started?
I'll speak up, just make sure that you can hear me.
Yep, we can.
Morning,
Good
Eugene.
morning.
Good to see you.
Morning.
And good morning. This is Patricia Salazar Ives. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can. Good morning.
And good morning, hearing examiners. Nick Rossi.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Eugene Evans.
Good morning to you. All right, we have just a few minutes before we'll get started. We'll get started right at 9 here. Okay. Morning again, everybody. I show it's 9 o'clock. Mr. Lee, are you ready to proceed, sir?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. Hearing examiner Ryan?
Go ahead.
Okay. So good morning. The time is now 9 a.m. We're now on the record in this matter before the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. Will please come to order. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of the petition of SBI Broadband LLC for designation as an eligible telecommunications carrier in the state of New Mexico. This case has been docketed as case number 24-00081-UT. My name is John Kreinkamp. I'm joined this morning by Christopher Ryan. We are the hearing examiners with the PRC who will be presiding over this matter today and ultimately providing the commission a recommended decision. This hearing today is being transcribed by a court reporter. For the sake of the record, I'd like to start with entries of appearance from the parties, starting with SBI Broadband.
Thank you and good morning. Carlos Padilla and Patricia Ives on behalf of SBI Broadband.
Excellent. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being here. And let's see, Telecommunications Bureau staff.
Good morning, Nicholas Rossi for the PRC Telecommunications Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, so just a couple preliminary notes procedurally as far as how the hearing is going to go. Then I'll talk about a couple of preliminary items that we need to address while we're on the record. So as far as this morning, we'll address those preliminary matters. I don't think that's going to take terribly long. At that point, we have two parties to this case. We have two witnesses. So that makes the order of examination quite straightforward, although I do appreciate SBI Broadband having filed that proposed order of witness examination earlier this week. We'll start with SBI Broadband's witness and then take staff's witness. I don't think that there is a need at this point to impose time limits on cross-examination this morning. So if that changes and we're here until 2 o'clock on the first witness, then that might be a little bit different, but I'm assuming that's probably not going to happen. Our expectation, I think, is that we will finish today clearly and possibly this morning. So with all that out of the way, just two preliminary matters to address. The first item, I think the easier of the two, is, and I noticed this at the end of the day yesterday, there may have been, I think, a simple error with one of the exhibits in Dropbox. I think SBI's Exhibit 1 is listed in the exhibit list as dated November 1st, 2024. But the version of the petition that was put into Dropbox appears to be the first amended petition dated September 10th.
I apologize.
No, and that's fine. I just wanted to, I'm assuming that that was meant to be included because of the date there. So if that's correct, I think the simple way to handle that is just to upload just a corrected version of that exhibit into Dropbox at your earliest convenience sometime today. I don't think that there's going to be any issues with admitting that as an exhibit, even without the corrected version in hand, because that's a document that we all have already. So,
And just sorry, make sure I understand. So, and this is partially for the benefit of Mr. Lee as he's wrangling all this so SBI Broadband Exhibit number 1, the amended application should be the petition, right? The initial application?
It should be, I think, the second amended petition.
Second amendment.
Okay, and so okay, should be the second amendment. Okay, so then that doesn't change any of the rest of the ordering of the thing.
No, I don't think so.
Exhibits.
Yeah,
that's fine.
It shouldn't.
So what basically SBI Broadband Exhibit number 1 will just be the correct amended application. Yes.
Yeah, it'll be the second amended petition. Is that correct, Mr. Padilla?
Yes. And actually what I'll do is
But you can't change it on our end. What you'll have to do is just call it like SBI Broadband Exhibit number 1 corrected or some additional, and then we can go in on our side on the Dropbox and delete the other one so that Mr. Lee has only those documents that should actually be incorporated into the record.
Okay. And for purposes of the hearing, if I'm sharing my screen to show the exhibit, I have corrected that on my end. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. The actual correct second amended petition.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Rossi, I'm assuming that's fine with staff.
No objection. Essentially, that's what we had discussed when we were discussing exhibits.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So the second item is going to be, I think, just slightly more time consuming. So this is the one that I emailed the attorneys about yesterday. That's what's listed in the SBI's exhibit list as the confidential exhibit 5. So there's a little bit of a background here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the protective order. And then hearing examiner Ryan will weigh in, then I'll kick it over to SBI Broadband. So just the order of operations on that. So this exhibit, as I understand it, and I haven't actually seen the unredacted exhibit yet, but my understanding is that this would be unredacted copies of SBI's financial statements, which were redacted as part of the petition. I'm assuming is that correct, at least that part, Mr. Padilla?
Yes, we know that they need to be in the record. Of course, we'd like confidentiality to be maintained.
Right. Yeah. And so that's essentially to bring Mr. Rossi, I guess, up to speed. So essentially yesterday we noticed that was part of the exhibit list. And we noted that the exhibit list stated that they were filed under seal. So that led us to have our law clerk to ask records if they were in fact filed under seal. Records appeared to confirm that something was filed under seal. They didn't quite know exactly what it was, but they knew that it was something that was filed. And is now being kept confidential at a secure offsite location. And they suggested that if we needed a copy of that, we reach out to SBI Broadband. And so at that point, our law clerk reached out to SBI Broadband and essentially, I think, was told that the exhibit wasn't really filed. The company was seeking to introduce it as an exhibit if necessary, but would insist on confidentiality. And so at that point, we sent out the email essentially saying, we're going to deal with this at the hearing. So in terms of the protective order that was issued, I think before hearing, Examiner Ryan and I were even in the case. So that protective order essentially outlines several ways to have confidential documents become part of the official record. The exact mechanics of that depend on who is seeking the admission, whether it would be the party who created those confidential records. In this case, that would be SBI, your opposing party, which would be staff, or the hearing examiners through a bench request. In any of those cases, although essentially I think what we're looking at is probably coming from SBI or potentially from a bench request, in either case, the process that's outlined in the protective order, and in particular, the language is in ordering paragraph K, I think subparagraphs 1 and 3. Essentially, what SBI Broadband would do is they would file a public version of the documents with the confidential material redacted. That's already been done. File a confidential version under seal in accordance with the procedure in paragraph D. That appears to have been done. At least Records thinks that they have a copy of something. And then SBI Broadband would serve the confidential version on the parties who have signed the confidentiality agreement, which would be staff, which I think has been done. And then the presiding officer, which at this point has not been done, but could be done.
So let me just interject real quick. And I think it's important for the benefit of the parties to understand, hearing examiner Krankamp, just the state of New Mexico for some time has not invested sufficiently in the commission. So we find ourselves in a position of having a docketing system that is wildly inadequate, right? So you would think the procedural order, or the protective order, if you read it, talks about a process involving pink pieces of paper. Yeah. And to the extent to which you read this and you think to yourself, what on earth is all of this about? Yes, that is exactly correct. Our docketing system should have a place or a functionality to facilitate the confidential exchange of exhibits. Thankfully, the legislature has appropriated us funds to disband eDocket and move to something that is actually legitimate, that involves searching functions and all kinds of different functionalities. So, I just think what I want to convey here is what you're experiencing here, parties, is really the downstream consequences of a commission that was not professionalized for far too long. And thankfully, that is all changing. So, and no one is to be blamed in this circumstance, and there's no error on anyone's part. It's really a function of failed investment in this commission as a professional entity over the last 20 years. So that's who we can blame for all this.
Now, once the document has been filed under seal and submitted to all the proper people, at that point, what is set out in paragraph K of the protective order is that SBI Broadband would essentially file a request seeking confidential treatment along with an affidavit and a brief setting forth essentially the reasons for confidentiality. At that point, then, staff would file a response addressing the legal and factual merits of the confidentiality claim. And I'm reading here from paragraph K1C, including staff's or the party's position on whether the confidential material is in fact confidential. So staff would essentially say whether or not they agree that the material is confidential. Then the hearing examiners would be required to issue a ruling as to the confidentiality of the exhibit. So that's the process that is before us, according to paragraph K of the protective order. So with all that being said, that doesn't necessarily have to happen. That did not need to happen necessarily before today. And I don't think that there's necessarily a problem. I don't anticipate that we wouldn't be asking any questions today about the particular details of those exhibits. And I don't anticipate that either Mr. Turley or staff will be making a specific reference to that material. So I don't anticipate any problems with doing this procedure after the hearing today. But I think at this point, the question would be sort of over to SBI as to whether you are seeking the admission of this document as a confidential exhibit or whether essentially the hearing examiners would be requesting that as part of a bench request. Hearing examiner Ryan, before I kick it over to SBI, is there anything else you want to add on this or correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in some ways, yes, I think what you're suggesting is the case. I mean, part of the issue would be like, a lot of the financial information that gets redacted in commission proceedings has to do with, allowing the regulated entity to maintain some degree of confidentiality that ultimately benefits the entity itself and then the rate-paying public, right? There is actual downside consequence to full transparency because competitive markets function on some level about access to information. So it would not be the case that, you could find yourself in a circumstance, particularly in the electric context, where if we were not to allow, RFPs to come in with redacted information, we could risk the possibility of creating a false floor, right? So if you're bidding around known information, that the lack of transparency actually helps ratepayers because then we're assured that we're getting the best, lowest bid. So that's, I mean, from my perspective, that's the key to a lot of these confidentiality things. I mean, I think on some level, the information that the regulated entity here supplied goes to their solvency and the capacity to provide service of the kind they're describing, and then do so with a financial backing that the commission can be confident that they have adequate resources. So, I mean, I would think that the entity would want that submitted, and then basically what we have to decide is effectively, is this confidential material? So that's what I would add, for whatever it's worth.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Padilla, I guess it's over to you at this point. Any response to a lot of what you've heard or any direction from SBI as far as how you want to proceed?
I think all of the proposed procedures in the protective order are accurate and something we can do after the fact. What we were planning to do this morning was basically just to get on the record and testimony that we have submitted those exhibits under seal, and whether or not there's been any changes or anything like that to them, and then get them admitted as that. I guess we could do a pending admission pursuant to the terms of the protective order, if that comes up.
Yeah, I mean, I see the question of admissibility as a little bit separate from the question of confidentiality. Sure. I mean, I think they can be admitted, and then after the fact, I mean, right now they are kept confidential until this process plays itself out.
Okay.
And then
we have to deem them confidential is the point to sort of take home.
Yes. Right. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
But for now, if there was an IPRA request right now, we would not release them. We would still have to go through this process in order to determine. So right now they are still being kept confidential.
Okay.
But
Ms.
can I
Ives?
just thank you so much. I was just going to say, I think SBI, we understand, and I think exactly what hearing examiner Ryan mentioned, that was our main concern. We want to make sure that we that the record is clear that we do have sufficient financial capacity to be certificated. That being said, we are also very concerned for the reasons that you described about competitors or anyone else getting a hold of that information. So if we had our druthers, we would actually not have it admitted or submitted or any of the above. But again, we want to make sure we're doing this properly and that the commission has what it needs. I think we've satisfied staff with regard to the information we provided them on that issue, but we're not sure what exactly the hearing examiners are going to request. So I guess this is a long way of saying I'm not sure if we can if we need to just wait and see what happens, or if staff or the hearing examiners would require that information. Because again, from our point of view, we'd rather not have to have it in the record at all.
Examiner Crankamp, Mr. Rossi, can you please tell us what is staff's position as to the necessity of this information in the record?
Staff's position on this is that we're not requesting its admission. We did wish to review it. The hearing examiners beat us to the punch and requested this information. I look at it sort of as like a discovery request where it was provided, but I'm not seeking its admission. It has been reviewed.
Do you foresee any problems that the commissioners themselves wanted to verify, or is it your position that staff's effective representation to the commission will be itself sufficient to satisfy whatever inquiries the commissioners would have?
As the confidentiality also applies to the hearing examiners, I don't see an issue with the hearing examiners reviewing it as well.
Right. Wait. No. Okay. So I think we're missing something here. Right. So what Ms. Ives said is they don't want to supply it if they have the opportunity. The question is not what do the hearing examiners want. The question is what does the applicant have to supply. I will tell you that my assumption is that the commissioners will ask the question, how can we be confident that they have sufficient financial solvency to do this service capably? The only way that you can verify that is if in the record there is some indication of as to what is the financial status of this entity. If your position, Mr. Rossi, is that those documents do not need to be admitted into the docket, the only thing that would exist in the record in this case would be your statements and your client's statements that we looked at it, we're good, and even though you can't see it, just trust us.
Yeah, and to be clear, Mr. Rossi, another thing that you had indicated was that the hearing examiners potentially could see it or have access to it. And I just want to clarify, so if that document isn't really part of the record, I mean, hearing examiner Ryan and I can't review it and then make statements about what that document contains because that's not part of the record. So
Precisely.
we would be bound by that.
Okay. I guess in that case, if the hearing examiners require more information, then your path is set in front of you. It must be admitted.
No, so Mr. Rossi, I'm gonna actually stop you there and say again, it is not a question as to what the hearing examiners want. It is a question as to what does staff think the commissioners will require in order to make an adequate determination. We provide a recommendation to them, and we can only project what it is we think they'll be interested in knowing. It's part of the challenge of the job. But it sounds like what you're telling me is you don't wish to take a position on these matters and to allow Mr. Hearing Examiner Crankamp and I to figure this out. And I will tell you, I don't feel comfortable with that response, to be perfectly honest with you.
Hearing examiners, can I interrupt?
Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
I tend to agree at this point. I think it should be entered into the record and to allow not only the hearing examiner, but the commission in general to have that information if need to be. So as the bureau chief here at telecommunication, I will say enter the information inside the record.
Thank you, of course, Mr. Evans. I will defer to my client.
Yeah, I mean, and part of this too is, from, I mean, to SBI Broadband is a question of what SBI Broadband, whether you want to include that in your case or not. I mean, because the hearing examiner Ryan and I have to make, I guess, a determination as to whether this needs to be a part of the record. We only get to that question if I think SBI Broadband decides not to really introduce it. And I guess that gets to Ms. Ives' point about, whether or not the record really needs to have this information. So,
and yeah, I think it's important to emphasize, and I think there are a lot of folks come to the commission and they have an understanding of what the commission has been. We just hired a new hearing examiner who came from Montgomery and Andrews and worked at the Department of Justice in the utilities section. And, so we're familiar with what the practicing community, has general thoughts about the commission. But what hasn't sunk in, and I've said this to many people in hearings, is the state of New Mexico amended its constitution, right? The people of this state said, we demand professional commissioners. They got that. These commissioners, I recall our newest employee saying she was with a senior partner from the firm, and it was a respected individual in the state of New Mexico. And he told her as he came in, pay attention to nothing that goes on in there because it's not real. And I understand that perspective has existed about the commission for some time, but what I'm here to tell you today is that is so far in the past at this point. I don't think public perception is quite caught up. These commissioners will ask lots of questions, and they always do. And whatever degree of inquiry we provide today, I think you will expect the same amount of inquiry from the commissioners when our recommendation gets to them. This is no longer a process in which the hearing examiners are the only ones, really scrutinizing stuff. The entire agency has moved in that direction. So I say that as like I don't think the public knows that enough. And I think it's important that we say it publicly, and that the practicing community understand the commission is an entirely different place now.
Yeah, and two things. One, hearing examiner Ryan, I think your video is cut out.
Yeah, it keeps cutting out. I don't know why.
Yeah. There you are. Yeah, I might suggest as a path forward to SBI broadband. We probably anticipate taking our morning recess around 10 o'clock, 10:15. Why don't we, you'll call your first witness. You can lay foundation for this document without actually seeking its admission right then and there. When we take our break at 10 o'clock, you and Ms. Ives can hopefully find a minute to chat about this and decide how you want to proceed. And then, we can sort of resume, that discussion at that time. I mean, I think we're all on the same page as far as what the process looks like as far as determining confidentiality. It's really just a question of whether you want it admitted and all that. And I think it's proper for SBI Broadband to make the first decision on that.
Thank you very. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you very much. I appreciate that. I didn't mean to make a mountain out of a molehill, and I just want the record to be very clear that we're not trying to hide any information. We've shared it with staff. We did submit it into the record under seal. It's just a matter of how long it lasts in there. So, and I do want to thank staff because they've been very cooperative and very helpful in maintaining the confidentiality and allowing us to give them information that they needed. So I just wanted that to be clear on the record. Thank you very much.
No, and I appreciate that, Ms. Ives. And I don't think you were making a mountain out of a molehill. I do think that's a legitimate question and a decision that should be made before we go much further.
Well, and I'll say for my part, as I'll be conducting the direct, like I said, I essentially intended to ensure that we had on the record stated that we'd submitted them, and then we could deal with that after the fact. And I was going to move in exhibits kind of in an omnibus fashion without having to do each one at the end of my presentation anyway. I will ask one other thing, or actually before I do that, to hearing examiner Ryan, I echo your sentiments. I've been attending many public hearings lately, and I think this commission is certainly very active and professional and doing their part. So I agree with your statements there. One other issue before we get into direct testimony, if I may, I realized in preparing for this morning that, and I had mentioned this to staff during our meet and confer, that in the midst of this matter, we were contacted by the Mescalero Apache telecom service, and we had come to an agreement with them about their service territory that we weren't going to provide service there. I need to bring that into the record through testimony today, which I intend to do, but I neglected to include our letter as an exhibit. that just confirms that agreement. And it's a letter by my own hand. So our witness has seen it and has approved it, but it is a letter. So if I may have to supplement that later. I could share it on screen. It's a very short letter. But I just wanted to get staff's opinion on that and perhaps the hearing examiner as to how to proceed with that.
Yeah, my main question was going to be if staff has seen that and if staff is aware of this.
Excuse me. I'm aware of the letter. I have not yet seen it. But I think as long as you can email it to me here very shortly, I won't have a problem with the admission of it.
Let me send that to you right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you send that to Mr. Rossi, I would add that to the along with corrected Exhibit 1. I guess this would be Exhibit 6. Upload that to Dropbox as well.
Sure.
Okay. So with that, any further preliminary issues that we should address on the record before we begin with our first witness?
None for SBI.
Okay. Okay. Seeing none from staff as well. With that, SBI Broadband, you can go ahead and call your first witness.
Thank you. SBI Broadband calls Guy Turley.
Okay. Mr. Lee, if you'd please swear in the witness.
Mr. Turley, if you'd please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Padilla.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Turley. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Guy Turley.
Thank you. And Mr. Turley, what is your position with SBI Broadband?
I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Smith Bagley Incorporated, the parent company, and also function in that with SBI Broadband.
Thank you. As the Chief Operating Officer, were you involved in development and filing of the amended petition in this case?
Yes, I was.
And Mr. Hearing Examiner, I'm going to, if I may, show Exhibit 1.
Sure. You should have the ability to share your screen.
I'm trying to see if I can. For some reason, it's not showing. Give me 1 second. There it is. Mr. Turley, can you see the record that's on my screen?
Yes, I can.
All right. Can you identify this record for the record?
Yes, it is the amended petition for our SBI Broadband receiving ETC status.
May I ask you, is this the second amended petition?
Yes, it is the second amended petition.
Thank you, sir. And does this petition include exhibits?
Yes, it does.
Give me a moment. I'll show you those. How many exhibits does this petition include?
There are two exhibits.
Have you had opportunity to review the amended petition?
Yes, I have.
Are there any corrections or additions you want to make to the petition at this point in time?
No, none at this time.
Okay. Mr. Turley, are you familiar with the Mescalero Apache Telecom, Inc.?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Have you had interactions or through your counsel with Mescalero Apache Telecom, Inc.?
Yes, we were familiar with their request that we exclude their zip code and service area from what we would provide SBI broadband services, and we agreed to do so.
Okay, what at this point, Mr. Hearing Examiners, I'd like to present what will be marked as Exhibit 6. I know it's out of order, but given our discussion this morning, it will be marked as Exhibit 6.
Okay. Are you offering that into evidence?
I will be, yes, Your Honor. I'll be asking to add all of this as an omnibus unless you'd like me to do it one by one with each exhibit.
No, that's fine. I mean, I see this letter. It appears to be what you've described as Exhibit 6, so
Okay.
that's fine.
Mr. Turley, have you seen the letter that I've presented to you as Exhibit 6?
Yes.
Are you familiar with its contents?
Yes, I am familiar. It was something we reviewed and agreed upon.
Okay. And was this letter sent to the Mescalero Apache Telecom, Inc.?
Yes, it was.
And what does this letter state?
It states again that their concern, as our application was to provide receive ETC status throughout the state of Mexico. Their concern was that we not provide those services in the Mescalero Apache Reservation area, and we agreed to exclude that from our planned service area.
Thank you, Mr. Turley.
That designated by the zip code.
Thank you very much. Okay, what next I'll show you what has been designated as SBI Exhibit 2. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Can you identify what this exhibit is for the record?
It is my direct testimony on behalf of SBI Broadband.
And is this the testimony that you filed in support of this amended petition?
Yes, it is.
Have you had opportunity to review your testimony?
Yes, I have.
Are there any corrections or additions you want to make to the petition at this point in time?
No, not at this time.
And does your testimony include 5 exhibits that were attached to the pre-file testimony?
Yes, it does.
And if asked, if those questions were asked to you today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Next, I will hand you what's been marked as SBI Exhibit 3. Can you please identify this exhibit for the record?
This was rebuttal testimony that I provided after some additional inquiries, I believe, from staff.
And is this rebuttal testimony that you filed in support of your amended petition?
Yes, in support of, yes.
All right, have you had opportunity to review your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Are there any corrections or additions you want to make at the petition to the rebuttal testimony at this point in time?
No, not at this time.
Right. And if those questions were asked of you today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Turley, let me show you what's been marked as SBI Exhibit 4. Can you please identify this for the record?
It's SBI Broadband's response to the bench request order.
Have you had opportunity to review this response?
Yes, I have.
Are there any corrections or additions you want to make to the response at this point in time?
No, not at this time.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Turley, as we discussed earlier, did SBI file financial statements into this case?
Yes, they did. Yes, SBI Broadband did submit those.
Were those financial statements filed under seal?
Yes, they were asked to be sealed and filed under seal.
Are they confidential financial statements?
Yes, as a private corporation, the confidentiality is extremely important. And so the sealing and the confidentiality of them is very important to the company and the shareholders.
Have you had opportunity to review the financial information submitted?
Yes, I have.
Are there any corrections or additions you want to make to those financials at this point in time?
No, not at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Turley. Mr. Hearing Examiners, at this time, I'd move for the admission of SBI's exhibits numbers 1 through 4 and exhibit number 6, reserving, I guess, discussion of exhibit number 5 for after the morning break.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rossi, any objection from staff as to the admission of SBI Broadband's Exhibit 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6?
No objection from staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, SBI Broadband Exhibits 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 are admitted into the record.
Thank you all very much. And at this point, I would tender the witness for cross-examination.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rossi, any questions for Mr. Turley?
Yes, sir. I do have a few questions.
Please go ahead.
In your application, or hello, Mr. Turley, I'm Nick Rossi. I think we've probably actually spoken a few times before, but thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rossi.
In your application on page 10, going into page 11, it's noted that service will begin in late 2024 or early 2025. And here specifically is the quote that I'm referring to. However, as previously stated, SBI Broadband's management has more than 25 years of experience of working with Native American tribes and the BIA, and is confident that its services will be available in late 2024 or early 2025. So I have a couple questions based on this. Has SBI begun operation in any state since a fair amount of time has passed since this was originally written?
Yes, SBI Broadband has started in the state of Arizona, and has provided services, as we indicated, the intent in New Mexico, primarily in a wholesale services to the parent company, SBI, but also into other residential services in Arizona.
So what is the status of the quoted statement now that it's currently the end of March 2025? How does your forecasting for rollout look now?
Unfortunately, we have not started any rollout in New Mexico. The projects that were contemplated in that remark and still have not received the right-of-way approvals through either the Navajo Nation or BIA, and construction has not started on any of those. So I believe when this application started with that, those statements were initially earlier in the year, and the indications that we were receiving is that right-of-way approvals would be received in 2024. However, they were not, and at this time, still monitoring it, and we do not have a good comfort zone on the timelines for those approvals.
Okay. In your testimony in response to staff's questions, SBI Broadband noted that you are working to obtain an updated letter of support from tribal governments. Are there any updated letters from tribal governments or agencies?
There are not to provide you at this time. We have made the request for an updated letter of support from the Navajo Nation, specifically through the Navajo Broadband Office. They've given us the procedures for that. We're following those procedures, but have not received that letter at this point.
Okay, thank you. With that, I have no further questions for this witness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. Hearing examiner Ryan, do you want to ask your questions first? Do you want me to go first? Either way is fine.
I'll go, and then I'll just I think we'll probably have a lot of overlap in them, so it'll be pretty straightforward.
Go ahead.
And just give me a second. I'll pull up the correct direct testimony cut here. So, Mr. Turley, I'm going to ask a very broad question, and if I understand your direct testimony, there is this, and then the petition itself, we have Smith Bagley Inc., and we have basically Smith Bagley Broadband, or it's actually SBI BB, so Smith Bagley Inc. Broadband, and those companies basically have, looks like total overlap. Is that right?
In the ownership, correct, yes.
Same management structure, or same management personnel, same basic, it's the same business, it's just a different name.
That is correct.
Okay, and so part of your testimony that I understand, and I was just trying, as I was waiting my turn to go to find where this says, and I'm not sure I found a direct quote, but I do understand what you're saying there is that the commission can have confidence in the services that Smith Bagley Inc. Broadband will supply because Smith Bagley Inc. has existed since 1994 and has been providing services effectively. Is that what your testimony?
Yes, it is. The organization Smith Bagley Incorporated, and as a recognized ETC in the state of New Mexico since I believe 2002. I believe that should be demonstrate the confidence that the state of New Mexico should have in the management and leadership of SBI Incorporated as well as SBI Broadband.
All right, and so the next question that I'm going to ask is, there was a bench request in this case asking for information about the track record of the function of the business, and I use the word business there very specifically because the responses to the question about, you know, has the business ever received any investigations or blah blah blah, the complaints. I mean, I'm just sort of speaking generally here. I don't want to get into the details of the bench request, but you know, it's just trying to assess how well Smith Bagley Inc. Broadband has provided service, like how competently. And the answers to all those questions were, well, we're a brand new business, so therefore there are obviously no complaints. And the trouble I had with that response is it entirely precludes, well, what is Smith Bagley Inc.'s track record? And given what you've just said, which is what I understood from your testimony, is that yes, you are asking the commission to evaluate Smith Bagley Inc.'s like long, good, you know, history of service as a projection of what's to come. Well, you didn't tell us anything about Smith Bagley Inc.'s performance and whether there were complaints of any kind over the last, what is that, 20 years or so, 1994 to 2024. Well, I'm not a math guy, but that's a fairly long period of time. And I guess my question with you, Mr. Turley, would be what should the commission make of that?
Well, I guess my answer, Mr. Ryan, is that we fully disclosed the relationship, and I think for the commission and the staff, they are more than welcome to inquire with SBI about the history, any of those same questions that you would like. There's nothing for us that we're trying to keep from the commission by answering the questions as asked about SBI Broadband.
Yeah, I guess that's my question is, do you believe if you're representing that SBI Broadband's future performance can be, you know, assessed, or the likelihood that it will be successful is predicated upon the fact that SBI has for a long time provided service, does the company wish to say anything about their former provision of service that would suggest that your contention that SBI Broadband will be successful in the future? Like, I will just be frank with you, sir. I have no capacity to evaluate that, other than that staff has told us that the information supplied is enough, but I don't know that we know anything about Smith Bagley Inc. So I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that question.
I can understand, Mr. Ryan, as a hearing examiner and your first exposure to SBI Broadband or SBI, that you would not have that history or that understanding. I'm grateful to hear that staff has recognized the relationship between SBI and SBI Broadband, and seems to indicate by your statement that that is adequate for them in their review.
Right. No, and I will have questions for staff about what how they came to the conclusion without any evidence in the record of Smith Bagley Inc.'s performance history that we can have any confidence that Smith Bagley Inc. Broadband. I'm not pre-answering that question. My point is simply, as the hearing examiner assigned to develop the record, at this juncture, given the answers to the bench request, all that I can write is we don't know. Aside, I mean, people can have opinions, but they have to be predicated upon evidence. So if you're saying look to Smith Bagley Inc.'s long history as proof that it'll be great in the future, well, you did not answer any of the questions regarding Smith Bagley Inc.'s track record in the past as regards like potential problems, and maybe none exist. Maybe the answer is that there has never been a single complaint about the provision of our service. I don't know that because you didn't tell us.
Would you like us to tell you?
It's entirely up to staff and the applicant. I'm an adjudicator. I take the evidence presented, and my job is solely to just say, hey, here's what they gave us. This is what you can infer from it.
I understand, and I understand what you're trying to get at there, and I will tell you this: we're again very happy to answer any questions that there may be. As you suppose, you're not in business for nearly 30 years and never have a dissatisfied customer or a challenge that has come your way. I think I would say with very high confidence that we've addressed any of those questions, those concerns, and worked to not only resolve them, perhaps not to everyone's satisfaction at the time, but to resolve them so that we could have our heads held high as we move forward in providing the services we have. I believe that's the case in the state of New Mexico, as well as with the FCC and the programs that we participate in at the federal level and at the state level.
I don't know, hearing examiner Crankham, and we've discussed this ahead of time, so I don't know if there's any follow-up you want to do. I mean, that's kind of, I think at this point I've got the answer to my questions on that particular subject. Anything you want to follow up on?
Not necessarily on that subject. I have other.
Yeah. No, I know you do. I just was wondering if we want to discuss that part of it. Well, okay, so let's ask some more general questions. Throughout varying pleadings, the indication was that there were 200 employees, but then the direct testimony says there's 175. Can I just infer that you're sort of rounding up in the pleadings?
I would say that yes, there has been some time between the initial application when that was put together and when my testimony was filed, and so there was adjustments there have been adjustments in that with regard to the employee base.
Okay.
I would also point out, as you're saying, there have been other adjustments that would have gone up. I think in the initial application, the cell site or towers was listed at around 200, and then in my testimony it was at 250. And so there's been advancement in some of that, where in other places that the numbers have modified or reduced.
Okay, I assumed that was what was going on. I just, when you see the difference, I just wanted to confirm that that's what's going on. I don't know that I fully understand. I saw at the end of your testimony, it seemed to me that you were responding what appeared to be interrogatories by staff. That was the best I could make of it. And you do talk about a subject I think is important for me to understand anyway, is why SBI Broadband? Like, why is it necessary to do this? And as I understand, it has something to do with federal spectrum licenses. I was hoping you could just help me understand why you are all making this new company and not just operating under Smith Bagley Inc. And then, that's what I'm trying to understand at the broadest level.
Great question, Mr. Ryan. I'll do my best to explain that. Smith Bagley Incorporated, when it initiated service, it started by obtaining from the FCC spectrum licenses, first in a couple of counties in Arizona. With those spectrum licenses, they initiated what at the time would have been cellular service. They've broadened that with licenses from the FCC, which have very specific boundaries. Too many iterations of that to detail, but let's just say that there are specific boundaries to those licenses that you're allowed to operate within. Those licenses focus on the Four Corners area, including that northwest quadrant of New Mexico. As a cellular or mobile communications operator, we are bound by those licenses in order to provide the services that we have for nearly 30 years. And however, there are, as we know, technologies advance, and there are other options that are now available and that are very viable. Many of those options are now for broadband are tied to direct connections to homes and to businesses. Those connections can be through either a wired connection, that's been copper, coax, or so forth in the past. Now the predominant means is by fiber optic cable. Other options include a fixed wireless connection to those homes. And those delivery methods differ from the mobile services that Smith Bagley, through it as operating as Cellular One, has provided for, like I say, nearly 30 years. So this is SBI looking at those opportunities that focus on some of the funding that is coming from the state of New Mexico, as well as from the federal government, and trying to determine how it could best position itself to take advantage of possible grants that may come, but also to deliver those services to a customer base that would like them. One of the things that comes along with that, and there's SBI Broadband has a pending petition with the New Mexico to receive a commercial local exchange carrier status that would work in conjunction with SBI Broadband and provide those services. So this is SBI, Smith Bagley Incorporated, looking at what is happening in the technology and the best way to establish an entity and all of the right organizational situations in order to move in that direction.
Okay, so your company starts out with federal licenses to provide a particular type of service, technology advances, and it sounds to me like what you're saying, and I'm sure it's all far more technical, but the former authorizations you received from the federal government make it either impossible or less efficient to begin to shift the business in a new direction to take advantage of new technologies and any incentives that exist. And so therefore you created the broadband company in order to move in that new direction. I mean, is that my understanding what you've just said correctly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Right. And I'm sure the legal explanation for all that is far more, as it always is, complicated. So I think it's just useful to know that that's what you all are doing. Can you, the AirMax service, could you describe that? Because you referenced it several times in your testimony, and I was just curious what exactly that is.
You bet, Mr. Ryan. AirMax is a brand name that we've adopted, and it's in use in Arizona. It is a primarily residential broadband that uses a point-to-multipoint technology to create that connection, point-to-multipoint wireless technology. Essentially what happens is from a cellular tower, there's broadcasting equipment that is placed on that tower, and then residents, small businesses, or whatever in the area have a receiving unit that are placed on that premise and creates a dedicated connection to that location. And so AirMax is primarily for us a residential broadband point to multipoint service.
And when you were referring to something called wholesale internet transport services, can you give me just a general description of what that is?
Yes, it's providing a high capacity broadband connection between two points in order to connect those points. Essentially, primarily, what would be talked about is a fiber optic connection that would go from one facility to another facility and provide bandwidth between those two. It can also be performed with high capacity microwave and creating a point-to-point broadband connection. And with that, the wholesale portion of that we refer to in that, it would be as we referred to with Smith Bagley Incorporated, operating, as I said, a mobile or cellular service. I've referred to our cell towers. So an SBI broadband would be managing the connections to those cell towers and providing a point-to-point high capacity broadband connection that then can be used for various services from that cell tower. That could also be to other locations that we provide to, as we mentioned in our application and in my testimony, to schools, hospitals, and others that are not residential but are higher capacity and can benefit from that dedicated point-to-point broadband connection.
At a general level, my understanding of part of what this hearing is about today, and I don't profess, and the question I'm going to ask you, I will tell you straight up, I don't profess to be an expert in this particular field of law. I'm doing my best to keep up. And but what I understand to be part of the, for instance, the State Rural Universal Service Fund, and I don't know if this concern also exists within the eligible telecommunications carrier designation, but there is this question about the more entrance into a market you have, to the extent to which there is a pool of money that exists in incentives. If you have, say, I'm not suggesting this is you all, but I'm saying if we were to admit someone who was not going to do something terribly productive, what we've done is dilute the total amount of money because it can get spread across more people or more companies. And I think that's what I understand part of our hearing today to be about. And I guess the question is to you, is that your understanding as well? And then secondarily, why should the commission have confidence that the increased consumer choice that you're going to provide the customers wouldn't ultimately be, a detriment to the other folks already doing that?
Mr. Ryan, it's a good question. I'll do my best to answer it. I will also tell you I'm not an expert in the law as regards to that, but I'll share with you my understanding. You mentioned two different points there that I'll try and separate. The universal service is a mechanism that generates funds, and then they are directed by the commission or others in a variety of ways. One of those ways historically has been to providers with certain parameters that are placed around them. We have never received those as others in the state of New Mexico has, and that is not the intent of what SBI Broadband is looking for. By looking for ETC status, there is another mechanism, and that is there are universal service funds from the federal and state level can go to individual customers that qualify for those funds in a subsidy type of a program. Primarily, the one I'll refer to as the Lifeline program that's been around for quite some time. And an individual has to show that they qualify within the parameters of that program in order to receive that subsidy. And then those subsidies go to the provider, not to the individual. And so that is what we're trying to do with ETC status here. How does that affect the universal service funds that are out there? Well, SBI Broadband is not going to be able to make up new customers that qualify for that. But if we can find those customers that have not received those services, that is our intent, to find places where that are unserved or underserved, and where a provider has not made those services available, then that would be a very nice target for us to go after. If there are customers that are receiving those subsidies, that are receiving them from another provider, and SBI Broadband can come in and provide another option, perhaps at maybe it's an improved service, then we provided that choice or option for that subscriber. And if we can encourage them to come to our service, then that's obviously to our advantage. But we cannot go out and create new qualifying parties to receive those individual subsidies. We can only compete with our fellow providers to try and deliver those services more effectively or efficiently.
Okay, and then I guess that's all very helpful information, and I'll part of the process here is I'm accruing information, and then you go back and you catalog it as you become more familiar with the subject matter. So, but the question I guess I would have for you as a follow-up would be, you talked about sort of the geographical problems that exist in serving these individuals in this area. And I guess one question I have is, you know, if you do have those, I mean, just the terrain is challenging. Should we understand to the extent to which there are underserved folks in those areas, that this reflects like a need that is in fact kind of driven a lot by just dealing with a really geographically difficult place to build in?
Well, you mentioned the geography, and the geography terrain is part of that geography. What I would add in the challenge is the population and the lack of density in the population in the areas that we have primarily served, that add to the challenge. Why much of it has been historically and unserved or underserved in those categories.
And do we know? So, and sorry, but I'll let you finish what you're just thinking there. But just before you do that, do we know how many underserved? Have you guys supplied evidence as to what your projections of those numbers are? Like how many folks you think are not being served that your entrance into this market will then serve?
No, we have not. The state of New Mexico, through the OBE, and if I'll mess up what that acronym exactly is, the Office of Broadband Equity and Advancement. But the state of New Mexico.
Hang on, Mr. Turley, hang on. Let's make sure we spell that just for the record. Can you spell that acronym for us?
OBAE.
Okay, thank you.
As a state agency, has monitored that and would have the mapping that would identify what they consider to be pockets of unserved and underserved.
But it sounds like your position is that that customer base does exist, and that's sort of the point of your move into this space.
Yes, and I think that's the position of the state of New Mexico, as well as the federal government, as indicated by one of the programs administered by NTIA right now, that is called the BEAD program, Broadband Equity and Expansion. And so there are many programs that are identifying and targeting unserved and underserved locations.
And I'm just going through the testimony to find my questions, so just bear with me. Oh, in your direct testimony, you pointed out that SBI's, and you don't need to go to the page, I'm reading to you what I'm just reading. It's page 11 on your testimony. The Lifeline tariff is not yet complete and finalized. We anticipate having it ready for submission to the commission soon after the new year. I wasn't sure what new year meant. I think it was 2026, but maybe I'm wrong. So can you just clarify, is that tariff available and when do you expect it to be?
Yes, that tariff has now been provided.
To staff?
Yes.
And is that in the record? Will that be staff?
Excuse me, this is Patricia Ives. I believe that it has been filed.
Okay.
And it may have been with amended or supplemental testimony.
Okay.
I believe it is with the rebuttal testimony.
Okay.
Just before we leave that, yes. So two things. One, yes, Ms. Ives is putting correctly in the text here. I just Googled this. The Office of Broadband Access and Expansion. And then second, I'm looking at Exhibit 3, and I don't see the tariff in there.
You're correct. I was looking at it now as well, and I do not see it in there either. We did respond to staff's questions on that with an updated tariff. I'm not sure that it's been filed. I believe it has, but let me look at the record.
Okay. I don't think it's in the record. Why don't we just consider that the first bench request for today, just for a copy of that tariff? And go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Hearing examiner.
No, that's good. I asked the question, not suggesting that I know the answer. I'm legitimately asking, do we have it? And it can be productive at times, then, because we just discovered. Beginning on page, and I just want to make sure I understand 13 of your testimony, direct testimony, that is, Mr. Turley. You're responding to a question. Please provide the unredacted copies of your financials. Am I to understand that these questions here are questions that staff posed to you and that you then incorporated into your testimony? Or did you formulate these questions yourself? I wasn't sure when I came across them.
I did not formulate any questions myself. Okay. We can answer
Okay.
that.
Is that what happened, Ms. Ives or Mr. Padilla? Were these interrogatories that staff asked that you then asked your witness to give responses to? Or did you guys formulate them?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, that's what I assumed, so I just wanted to make sure. Hearing examiner Krankamp, that's all. Well, let me just go to his rebuttal. I'm sorry. That's relatively short, so if I have any questions, I'll know pretty quick. Those are all my questions I had for Mr. Turley, hearing examiner Krankamp.
Okay, that sounds good. I will have questions. I think we're at 10:08, so we'll go ahead and just take our morning recess. We'll take a 10-minute break, come back at 10:20 or so. When we come back, I'll ask my questions, then we'll do redirect, and then we can return to Exhibit 5. So just to give you a roadmap for where we're going.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll be on recess for about 10 minutes. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Yeah, the video thing is I keep getting this error message. It might be a USB connection. I tried to plug the USB back in for the camera. I think that's what it maybe was a little loose or something. So if it goes out, that's just what that is. I'd have to meet with IT to make sure if it's a problem in the long run.
Okay. Mr. Lee, everything good, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I'm doing a quick scan here. Need my glasses for that. And yes, looks good. Looks like we have everyone. Everybody ready? Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, so we are back on the record. The time is now 10:20 a.m. And where we left off, hearing examiner Ryan had just finished his questions for Mr. Turley, and now it's my turn. Good morning, Mr. Turley.
Good morning, Mr. Crankamp.
Okay, so I have a few questions for you, mostly just about the specifics in your testimony and just getting more detail. Let me follow up just because it's on the top of my mind. One of the questions that Mr. Rossi had asked you was about essentially SBI Broadband starting up, I guess, operations in Arizona. If you remember that, and I think the answer was that you had given that you were in operation now in Arizona, but not yet in New Mexico because you were waiting on right-of-way approvals through Navajo Nation and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Is that right? Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, did you need to get those same approvals in Arizona?
Yes, for where we are providing those services, we had to go through the proper permitting and right-of-way approvals for the services that we were building and then connecting. So yes.
Okay. And does that process just take longer in New Mexico, or is there any reason why you were able to get those approvals in Arizona before New Mexico?
A couple of reasons. Several of the ones in Arizona were not on tribal land, so there wasn't the BIA element to it. We have done some services on the Navajo Nation in Arizona. Primarily, those were smaller in the length and with that simpler to get the approvals. There's another element in New Mexico on the Navajo Nation, specifically in the eastern agencies of the Navajo Nation, in what has historically, commonly known as the checkerboard.
Mm-hmm.
And that is with land use designation that differs between Navajo Trust Land, Bureau of Land Management, private land, and so forth. And so especially on some of the projects that we are pursuing in New Mexico, they crossed multiple land designations, and that complicates the matter significantly.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, hearing examiner Ryan, I think, asked you just a little bit about sort of the background of SBI, the parent company. I guess my question was, so SBI, my interpretation of the documents that I've seen is that you are again, talking about the parent company, is focused on the Four Corners states. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the base of operation is in Show, Arizona. That's where it originated. And as I mentioned, the spectrum licenses that have been obtained through the years have focused on the Four Corners area in the boundaries for the cellular part of that service.
Okay. Now, does that include Utah and Colorado? Do you provide services, for instance, in Mexican Hat or Blanding or Cortez, anything around there?
Yes, in southeastern Utah, we provide services primarily for the Navajo Nation there. So we do have services and not all the way into Blanding, but in Mexican Hat, Montezuma Creek as an example, in some of those areas. We do have a service in Cortez. We don't do much, honestly, in Colorado. As you've gathered in some of this, one of our primary focuses over the years have been the tribal lands with the Navajo Nation and its geography being most substantial. There was a great deal of focus on that, as well as some of the other surrounding tribes in Arizona, primarily Hopi and White Mountain Apache. We also do provide service for the Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico, as it is in close proximity. Then we also provide services in many of the communities, the connecting communities that are around that area.
Okay. And SBI, again, the parent company, I mean, are they certified as an ETC in Arizona, Utah, Colorado as well?
In Arizona and Utah, not in
Okay.
Colorado.
Not in Colorado. Okay. And my understanding from the testimony is that currently SBI Broadband is not currently seeking ETC certification outside of New Mexico. Is that correct?
At the current time, it is not.
Right. But I imagine that is it fair to anticipate that that would change at some point in the future here, probably in Arizona and Utah?
Yeah, as we follow that trajectory, yes, it would be a similar approach.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful. Let's see. So where to start? Let me ask you, there were a couple of statements in both your testimony and then in staff's testimony that I took note of. One question that I had, and this I think sort of touches on one of the questions from hearing examiner Ryan. If you look at page 9 of your direct testimony, so this is exhibit 2. And you're asked about how designation as an ETC would impact the state or federal USF. You say at the end of that first paragraph that the impact on the fund, and that I believe is a reference to the state Rural Universal Service Fund, would be positive because it would benefit New Mexico customers in the manner intended by the program. The word positive in the context of a fund made me sort of do a double take. I assume you mean it's a positive impact on the fund in terms of meaning that the money in the fund would be expended for the purpose of the fund, not necessarily a positive financial impact. Am I correct about that?
Yes, Mr. Krankamp, that's what I'm referring to. If the intent of the fund is to provide services to those in need, and a provider is willing to take the steps to connect that need with those funds, then I think that's a positive.
Right.
I have a little comment bubble that says, what does this mean that the impact on the fund would be positive? So good question, hearing examiner Krankamp.
And, as I'm thinking about the fund, I guess this is both the state and the federal fund. I mean, in the short term, it seems to me that the way that SBI Broadband has framed its application is that essentially what you're doing in the short term is you're going to be rolling out in the areas already served by SBI, the parent company, right? So and then eventually you would expand, and I'll have more questions about that issue later. But it seems to me that the impact on the fund in the short term, then, if you're essentially stepping into the shoes of the parent company, I mean, it would not really affect the fund really at all, other than essentially shifting where the funds are going to, right? Essentially, instead of going to SBI, now they would go to SBI Broadband. Is that a fair way to look at that?
Yeah, I think going back to some of the questions, Mr. Krankamp, that I had answered from Mr. Ryan, we can't make up new customer base.
Right.
It's just trying to find as many of them as exist.
Right.
And then deliver the services in the way that they prefer to receive those services. And so that's what we're trying to do in that is, and as we say, is the technology, are there advancements in technology and changes in technology? It's looking for what is the right mix to have and the best way to deliver it.
Right. And I think that my understanding of the way that the Lifeline program works is that it's not even necessarily looking at customers as much as it is a household, right? Because a federal subsidy can only be provided, I think, one per household. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, one per household, correct.
Okay, okay. Are you aware, and if you're not aware, then I'll ask staff this question. Are you aware, just looking just to the, I guess, the Four Corners region of New Mexico, that sort of northwest quadrant, how many, so obviously SBI, the parent company, is designated as an ETC. Do you know, are there any competitors in that area? Is it just SBI? Can you give me any sense of what the market is like there?
Yeah, there are several competitors that we have, that we aggressively compete with to try and provide the services. The staff could probably give you a much more exhaustive list of that, but you know, there have been a variety of them. Ones that come to my mind, there's been ComNet that I believe has ETC status and operated under the Choice brand. They provided that in the past. Sacred Wind Communications, which also now is part of the ComNet organization. And then as there's more, there are probably others that are less familiar to me as well, in some of the surrounding areas that have that ETC status, whether they be some of the electric co-ops and what they provide, where they're providing broadband services, or others.
Okay. And I mean, while we're on that subject, I mean, and you talk a little bit about this in your testimony, one of the questions that the commission will look to when determining whether ETC designation is in the public interest is the unique sort of advantages of a company's offering, and then potentially any disadvantages. Can you speak a little bit more in detail to the advantages that SBI or SBI Broadband, you know, that your services, what are the unique advantages?
Yeah, what I would speak to there is Smith Bagley Incorporated was really revolutionary on the tribal lands in Arizona and New Mexico in providing services starting in the 90s, when cellular was just starting to come around, and providing the first mobile communication available to many of the tribal areas that has already been talked about as being geographically remote, challenging, and the population density in that also contributes to the challenge. The economic status of much of the region has also contributed to where many providers over the last 30 years until recently have not wanted to take on this region as a business opportunity. Smith Bagley Incorporated was different from that. They saw that there was opportunity, not without challenge, but certainly opportunity, and then worked to bring that about in a number of ways. Mr. Bagley himself, the founder, was instrumental in lobbying back in Washington for the Lifeline program benefits to be expanded beyond just what had been the traditional wireline phone option, to have mobile or cellular services included as in that benefit. And that made a tremendous change, not only obviously for our company in what we were able to do, but in providing services to the people of the region, primarily on the tribal lands. And so with nearly a 30-year history of providing those services, engaging with the tribal communities, recognizing their sovereign nature, and honoring their culture in that, and looking for the ways to provide those solutions. helping understanding what the policies and procedures may be if they existed, and if they did not exist, helping to work through them to do things in an above board fashion, and in cooperation with the various tribal governments, and be able to bring those services to the people there. And has been mentioned again with the geography and the terrain, it was very challenging. So the uniqueness that Smith-Bagley Incorporated brings to this is a long-standing history, proven of cooperating and working with the tribal governments, particularly, not just limited to tribal governments, but to others, and then developing an organization and an infrastructure to provide those services. And when I refer to infrastructure, I'm not only talking about the network, a combination of towers and equipment and so forth that provides the service, but the infrastructure, meaning we have 13 brick and mortar store locations that are in the region, providing a location for customers to come and receive services, to customer care connectivity where problems can be addressed and resolved. And with all of this organization and infrastructure, the intent of that and where the business benefits is by connecting what you, as you talked about, the lifeline benefit to that customer. And that comes through a provider. As an example that I'll give that no longer exists for the last year, but several years ago in the midst of the pandemic, the federal government came out with a program called the American Connectivity Plan, ACP, which provided an additional benefit to those that qualified. But all they did is say, here's the benefit. Somebody had to connect those that qualified to that benefit. And the SBI Incorporated infrastructure was able to do that very rapidly and effectively to those that could benefit from that. And so I think that speaks to your question about the uniqueness of what SBI Incorporated offers, and then, as we say, to extend that on to SBI Broadband.
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously with, a petition like this, there's a lot of discrete sort of criteria that we look to, but the fundamental question is a question of the public interest. And I appreciate that. What I'm hearing from you essentially is that there's a degree of expertise and a familiarity with providing service to some of these areas that SBI Broadband would be bringing to bear. Let me ask you this. So it sounds like, in terms of where SBI has been located, that's primarily been Navajo Nation, and some other tribal areas like Hopi, and I think you mentioned some other areas in Arizona. Do you have an outreach plan in mind for reaching out to the various pueblos in New Mexico? I mean, obviously, Navajo Nation has its, very developed form of government, but, reaching out to, let's say, the Pueblo of Okeowinge or the Pueblo of Acoma would be a little bit different just based on their structure. Do you have a plan on, how you're going to go about, working with those tribal governments and providing service to their tribal members?
Great question, Mr. Crankamp. What we would look at is we would explore recognizing their sovereignty and what they desire, and seeing if there is an opportunity and a need. Many of the pueblos at this point have started to look at providing their own telecommunication services, either by themselves or in cooperation with others. as has already been mentioned in the record today, the Mescalero Apache has a very well-developed telecommunications program. And obviously they monitor and are astute with what was happening in the state with the inquiry that they made to us. We know that there are others that are doing that. In fact, I would just point out, next week, the National Tribal Telecom Association is having their semi-annual conference. It is actually going to be held at Whitehorse Pass on the Gila Indian Reservation in Arizona, just south of Phoenix. And I'll be attending that. The intent of that whole organization is to encourage the tribal nations to develop their own telecom group. So if they have already done that, then there's probably not an opportunity for us. If they have not and are interested, and there's a way that we can participate with them, then we would certainly look at that.
Okay, that's helpful. So let me direct you then. So a major source of my questions, hearing examiner Ryan asked you some questions, sort of about sort of the business background of SBI and all that, and that was one of his main questions. My main question is, and you address this on page 10, primarily page 10 of your direct testimony, so that's Exhibit 2. And you're asked this question, is SBI willing and able to offer service throughout its proposed service area within a reasonable time frame as required by the commission's rules? And I'm not going to ask you about the law about that. Obviously, you're not an attorney. That's going to be Mr. Padilla and Ms. Ives who can talk about the law there. But just so that I understand your answer here. You said you're determined and willing to offer services within a reasonable time frame. Can you give me some idea of what reasonable time frame means to you, or sort of what the plan is for SBI Broadband here going forward?
Well, as I think I've mentioned already, Mr. Krankamp, the first thing is to make sure that we have all the right approvals in place. We clearly are already providing services in some fashion, but as we want to advance them in this direction, one of the key things in this is to look at the process, and I'll speak primarily to something, and that is fiber optic as one of the areas that we're looking at. As I described prior to Mr. Ryan, in this, a point-to-point high capacity broadband connection, now primarily done through fiber optic, can also be done through microwave. We have a number of projects that are contemplated and in the process of trying to receive those approvals. We regularly try and work to get those approvals obtained so that we can then move forward with putting that fiber optic into place and make it available for the action. That is what is the primary timeline driver for us. So that's why it's difficult for me to give you a time frame, because as we pointed out, some of these have been in the process of trying to obtain approvals for 4 to 5 years. Okay. And every year we come in very hopeful with what's going to happen with that. And unfortunately, as I've already described, we've been disappointed in not being able to receive those approvals. Now, is it a very tacit review that we're doing? No, we're very engaged in trying to move this along. We regularly engage with the Navajo Broadband Office. They have regulations that they've been looking at and pursuing in various forums over the years. We've participated in those forums for dialogue, for improvement, and trying to see what can be done to adopt those, which includes right-of-way reform. We engage with, where appropriate, with the Office of the President, the Vice President of the Navajo Nation. We participate in the Alliance for Navajo Broadband, which is an organization, a nonprofit organization that was formed specifically to try and address broadband needs on the Navajo Nation. It includes not only providers, but educational institutions, chambers of commerce, and other participated or interested parties and stakeholders. All of these things to try and facilitate the change that would help move these forward at a more rapid pace. With that being said, once those approvals can be obtained for the right-of-way and then construction completed, we would right away be putting those into service. What is identified and targeted in this includes connecting fiber optic to quite a number of our cell towers, as well as other anchor institutions, including schools and chapter houses. And then with that, then what can happen along the way, and this is the way I would describe it, this is the hope, is that as you, if you can implement fiber optic along a path to connect a point, say it's a cell tower, what else is available along that path? Are there residences or other things that now, once you have that essential, what we would call a middle mile connectivity, then you can branch off from that to last mile connectivity to other businesses, residences, and so forth. So I hope you feel that I'm not trying to talk around your question of time. No. I'm just trying to give more context as to why it's difficult to give you a time frame.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, and I think the issue is complicated in part because, I mean, I don't know how reasonable it is to expect you to get all those approvals and actually lay the fiber optic cable or however that works before you actually receive approval to be an ETC. But it is a question that I had. And I guess the follow-up question, just so that I understand, is, you know, you get these right-of-way approvals in the necessary locations. How long does that actual construction process take? Is it quick? Is it pretty easy to get that done, or is that another super time-consuming process?
Well, and I'm sorry to laugh at that. Compared to receiving the rights of way, it's a really short time frame. Generally, with equipment on hand and so forth, it would be a matter of months. Of course, that depends on the length of what you're talking about, and then other factors that can come into play, whether you're a rock dig or it's good soils, and so forth. But generally, it would be a matter of months to complete that once the right-of-ways are approved and there is an official notice to proceed issued that would allow the construction to begin.
Okay. Let's see.
Ask a follow-up question real quickly about that. I'm
yeah,
just curious more than anything. It's the detail. Has the with if you're installing a lot of fiber optic cable, has the scale of fiber optic rollout by all providers of internet service, has that scaled up to a point that it's a relatively affordable thing to install?
I think that what has happened is, as often occurs, we are in the front edge of a lot of things, and there are others, and Mr. Evans may be more appropriate to answer some of this with his experience. But what I would tell you is that as there became the anticipation of a lot of fiber optic happening, then the costs have actually increased, because to try and ramp up the production of things and all of that, the costs have gone up. At some point, after the next bubble comes and works through, and what I'm referring to is the BEAD program, that's a nationwide with $42 billion being put out there for fiber optic to be deployed throughout the United States. Everybody's reaching out to that, and I think the costs, what we've seen is the cost have risen with that. After that bubble, then you may see production has been ramped up, and so there's now ample production available and without as much demand, and costs may come down.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Mr. Turley, let me ask you one of the questions, and I think this might have been one of the questions that, as hearing examiner Ryan pointed out, were sort of like interrogatories posed by staff. But one of the questions that they asked, and this is on page 13 of your direct testimony, so Exhibit 2, was essentially, what is the plan for SBI, the parent company? They ask ETC decertification, providing different services. And I'm not fully certain that I understand the answer there. I mean, and the answer might very well be that it's undetermined at this point in time exactly what's going to happen with SBI. But, you know, the question about ETC decertification did occur to me as well. So, I mean, is there a plan right now for that? Do you intend to eventually relinquish that certification because SBI Broadband will take over? You know, where try to answer that again for me, I guess, is what I'm asking you to do.
There's no, Mr. Krenkamp, there's no plan to withdraw the ETC certification for SBI Incorporated. As has been pointed out with SBI Broadband, it starts off in very targeted and specific areas in trying to go after building out things that could be very directed to residences and so forth, where SBI as a company through their Cellular One can still continue to provide a broader scope, and so it would be quite some time before there would be any thought of having the SBI Broadband reach the same magnitude of service and coverage as what SBI Inc. Provides at this time.
Okay. And that makes sense. Let me then ask you, I think my last question, and this is probably just that I'm not very well versed in the jargon here, but want to ask you about two answers in your testimony, and it's going to be a little bit complicated because one is in your direct and then one is in your rebuttal. But the first question, actually, let me direct you to your rebuttal testimony first because it's probably easier. So you are asked on page 3 of your rebuttal testimony. So this is Exhibit 3, page 3. Staff, I think, had asked you to testify about whether you intended to offer, this is SBI Broadband, intended to offer basic voice service to low-income customers. And the answer was, we do not intend to offer any basic voice services. That's how I read that answer. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So then help me understand, and I'm guessing this is a very simple answer that I just haven't worked up to yet. But if you look at page 6 of your direct testimony, you are, this is page 6 of Exhibit 2. You're asked this question about, will SBI Broadband provide the services that the FCC has identified for a carrier to be designated as an ETC and receive federal Universal Service Fund support? And here you say, yes, SBI Broadband will provide voice-grade access to the public switch network or its functional equivalent. Is that the functional equivalent part? Is that the part of that answer that explains what I would otherwise...
Functionally equivalent, what would be available is what we would refer to as VoIP services, voice over IP.
Okay.
And so that would be capable. It's not intended in our for, say, our residential service. That's not what we're intending with that. It would just be a broadband service that the customer could use at their discretion.
Okay.
In a more, and this is it'd be a side piece that here's one of the ways that I would explain that. If we were providing a broadband service to an anchor institution, say a school, and that school then wanted to provide or wanted voice services or VoIP, that would be a whole different service. But it would not be a primary aspect of what we were delivering in that dedicated broadband connection.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I think that's all the questions I have for you. Hearing Examiner Ryan, do you have anything else?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Turley, for testifying. At this point, let's see, Ms. Ives, do you have any questions on redirect?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I should have asked if it was going to be you, Ms. Ives, or Mr. Padilla doing cross, but
you read our mind.
Either way is fine.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Mr. Turley, I just wanted to follow up on some questions about SBI, the parent company's track record. How long have you been with the company?
I've been with the company in July of this year. It will be 15 years.
And during your tenure, the 15 years you've been with the company, have you participated in any proceedings before the PRC?
Not on an official basis. I've attended PRC meetings, and I think just in open comment, I've provided question or comment, but not in any official proceedings.
But have you participated or been involved with Smith Bagley in its participation in PRC proceedings?
Similar to this, no.
But in others, are you familiar with any of the comment proceedings?
No.
Okay. Are you aware that Smith Bagley has participated in a number of comment proceedings before the commission rulemakings?
In rulemakings, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood. Yes, Smith Bagley has been engaged with the commission in a number of the things that have gone on with the commission. And in particular, there have been, we commonly refer to it as the broadband program. And Smith Bagley with council was engaged in helping formulate the rules and comment on those and help them come about. And then we've regularly engaged with the commission in that broadband fund and participated by applying for and completing quite a number of projects in that broadband fund with the commission.
And have you reviewed or provided any information to the commission with regard to Smith Bagley's applications for participation or awards from the broadband fund?
Yes, I was heavily involved from SBI's standpoint in the preparation of the applications, striving to make them conform with the guidelines that the commission put out for that application, to make sure that they met the requirements. And then we regularly participate in or provide what is required with semi-annual reports in June and December of each year with the status of each of the grants that have been awarded to SBI and what the status is with them. And then as we've completed projects through the years with the report that indicates the completion with the documentation that shows that the project was complete per the application and per the award.
Mr. Turley, have you ever received or are you aware of SBI receiving any complaints regarding its participation in any of the broadband program applications that it has applied for or been awarded?
We have had challenges to our applications in previous years by other stakeholders, and we've answered those challenges in some cases in cooperation with the other stakeholder. We've withdrawn some applications. In other cases, we replied to the challenge and let the commission review that. And in those cases, in the two cases that I have in mind, I believe the staff and the commission saw our reply and then let our applications continue forward.
Have you ever received any complaints from the commission or the commission staff about how SBI has used the application? I'm sorry, not the application, the awarded monies from the broadband fund?
No, I'm not aware of any complaint about the work that we've completed.
Besides the challenges to the applications, are you aware of any complaints from the commission or its staff regarding any of the service that SBI has provided in the state of New Mexico?
No, I'm not aware of any.
Would you be aware if there were complaints?
I believe that I would. Not that the commission may reach out to me directly, but through our representatives, they certainly would have, and I would have been the first one notified within our organization. That doesn't mean I haven't had interaction with staff from time to time with questions regarding applications to clarify what may have happened, and also to make clarifications about what the intent of the fund may be and how it could best be applied. I've also engaged, we've engaged at appropriate times with the commissioners to make sure that they were familiar with SBI, what our track record was, and to answer any questions that they may have about our history or the participation.
You aware that SBI has intervened in other ETC applicants' proceedings?
Yes, absolutely. We have.
And why has SBI participated in those or intervened in those proceedings?
What my wording and why we've intervened is because we have viewed those applicants as bad actors. They've had a bad track record and in other places that they've operated. Why would we make that complaint and try and do that? Because as has already been pointed out, we are not opposed to competition. We think that's healthy. But when bad actors come in that don't have a track record of interacting, especially in the tribal areas, and being culturally sensitive and appropriate, excuse me, it actually causes many problems, and for us as well. I apologize.
If you need to take a second, that's fine.
You're in Arizona, Mr. Turley, right? New Mexico, the allergy season is in full swing in New Mexico.
Yeah. Sorry, I apologize for that. An example of what happens to us is when certain people come in and claim to be providing the services. We commonly call them the man in the van. The man in the van shows up at the swap meet at the reservation, and they're selling phones out of the back of their car, and it sounds like a great deal. And so you now have somebody that has a phone and they walk away and it doesn't work. But the man in the van's gone. And where does that person end up? Often they end up at our store wondering why their phone doesn't work, because we're recognized as the predominant provider. And that becomes a problem. That customer that was probably ours at one point has a problem. They've lost some money, and they may have to put more money in to get a different phone. That's why we've opposed other people that we have considered by their history bad actors, and tried to keep them from coming in and causing problems.
How would you describe your working relationship, and I mean SBI's working relationship with the staff of the PRC?
I think SBI's view on that is very positive with the staff. We've tried to be very open. We have an open dialogue. Try and timely respond to any questions or inquiries with the information that's requested and that's needed.
Now, you also mentioned that SBI, the parent company, is certified in Arizona, and then you also have activity at the federal level. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How would you describe the SBI's track record in Arizona? Is it similar to New Mexico? And I apologize, that's a compound question. Let me ask the first one first. How would you describe SBI's track record in Arizona?
It's a very good track record in Arizona. With the Arizona Corporation Commission, I am not aware of any pending complaints or challenges with the Arizona Corporation Commission.
And how about with the FCC?
With the FCC, we have a good relationship there as well. As a long ETC recognized provider with the FCC, and with the Lifeline program in particular with USAC, we obviously go through regular audits that we respond to timely and resolve, and continue to maintain our status as an eligible telecommunication carrier.
Have there been any complaints at the FCC with regard to any of Smith Bagley's filings, required filings?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Do you have any reason to believe that the relationships, the track record that you've described in New Mexico, in Arizona, wherever else, FCC, wherever Smith Bagley is operating, that those positive relations that you've described and the track record that you've described, that it would be any different for the petitioner in this case, which is SBI Broadband?
No, I don't think there would be any difference.
And then I just had another line of questioning with regard to the reasonable time period within which you would be beginning to provide service. I'm not asking for a legal opinion, and I don't want you to give me a legal definition of reasonable time. But I would like to know your interpretation and definition of it from a layman's perspective, especially someone in your business capacity for SBI.
Thank you. I'll do my best to answer that. I think reasonable to me is that it's not unduly delayed, and the delays unduly, I think, is the key there. Delays can come in because of external factors. And as I've described, one of those key factors is obtaining all the correct permissions. And so you try and put your plans together, and you're ready to act once all the approvals are obtained. And that is our intent with things, but we can't control some of those external factors. And so to me, reasonable would be that we do not unreasonably delay moving forward.
Would it be safe to say then that can change from area or jurisdiction to jurisdiction?
It does, and depending on the factors that play into it, you can, an example. I'll give you an example of what we're experiencing in Arizona. This has to do with power line, but I'll give this as an example. On the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, we developed a new cell tower. We extended fiber optic to that tower, but then as we're trying to get power to that location, there were human remains that were found on that path. As you can imagine, all of a sudden it was stop and go back and start over again with looking for a reroute. How long will that take? Don't know. But that is one of those factors that could impact as you're trying to do fiber optic as well.
One final area I'd like to ask you about is your tariff. If I may, I'm going to share my screen right now. And oops, actually,
I've got
Carlos,
enough.
what, can I just go back?
Sure.
Let me just share mine very briefly because I want to show something else. If you could take a look at this, can you see that, or do I need to zoom in? Maybe I better zoom in just for everybody's sake, not
that would help
including
me.
my own. Yeah, including my own. Not as easy as it for me anyway. Let's see. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe what this is?
The attachment appears to be the SBI broadband tariff. And it is being an email delivering it to the PRC staff.
And are you copied on this email?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And are you familiar with the, I'm going to open the attachment, with the attachment here, this, what appears to be or let me have you describe it. What is that?
Yeah, this is the local exchange and private line telecommunications tariff that SBI broadband prepared to deliver to the PRC staff.
And it, did you receive any response from staff that they had any additional concerns or issues with this tariff?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And is this the tariff by which SBI broadband would plan to provide services in the state of New Mexico if its ETC certification is granted by the commission?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I would like to at this point move for admission the tariff that I have here on my screen, and I apologize, I've lost track of the numbers.
It would be Exhibit 7.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, well, I don't have any problem with that. Let's see, Mr. Rossi, any objection from staff if this is admitted as SBI Broadband Exhibit 7?
No objection from staff. We did receive this back in February as clearly shown, and I do have a copy of it, and my witnesses have reviewed it.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, thank you, Ms. Ives. SBI Broadband's Exhibit 7 is admitted into the record. What I would ask you to do is to add this to the documents. I don't know how many now, but I guess this would be another document that you would upload to Dropbox so that we can get that to Mr. Lee. And then with that previous bench request issued earlier today is withdrawn, given that this has now been admitted.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner, and we have updated that into the exhibit folder, as well as the corrected second amended petition.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. And what about SBI
Okay.
Exhibit 6?
Yes, and that's also been added.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay, back to you, Ms. Ives.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. And Mr. Turley, I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much. I am through with my redirect. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Rossi, do you have any remaining questions?
No, I do not have any further recross. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Hearing Examiner Ryan, I do have one additional question just based on Ms. Ives' line of questioning just now. Do you have any follow-up right now?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Turley, just one follow-up question. Ms. Ives asked you what I found to be a helpful line of questioning about the SBI, the parent company, their track record at the federal level and then in Arizona. And just sort of to close the loop there, I think that when I had asked you some questions, you had indicated that I think SBI, the parent company, does have ETC certification in Utah as well.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit to your track record in Utah?
Yeah, well, not aware of any complaints with Utah at this point either.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that I had.
If it's possible, can we take just a 5-minute recess and then have Mr. Olafinzau, and I think we should be able to finish up before the noon, maybe 12:30, something like that.
That's fine with me. Let's see. Mr. Padilla, Ms. Ives, and Mr. Rossi, that work for you?
No objection.
No
It
objection.
does. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute recess just now, and then we'll come back with staff's witness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you get those tempura shrimp out and cook them up in the freezer outside?
Mr. Lee, you doing okay, sir?
Yes, Judge, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, sounds good. And are you okay if we go until about 12:30, 12:45 even?
Certainly.
Okay, I appreciate it. All right, so it looks like we have everyone back that we need. So I believe we left off, SBI Broadband has finished its witness. Mr. Rossi, staff can call its first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Staff will call Oluwatosin Olafinso.
Let's see. Mr. Lee, if you could please swear in the witness.
Mr. Olfosen, if you would please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see. Go ahead, Mr. Rossi.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Olafinso, this always sounds like a silly question, but could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Oluwatosin Olafinso.
And how are you employed?
I was employed with the New Mexico Public Regulations Commission as a telecom public utility economist.
As part of your duties, did you review this application or petition?
Yes, I do.
And did you prepare testimony for this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Do you have a copy of Staff Exhibit Number 1?
Yes, I do.
And was this testimony prepared by you?
Yes, it was.
Is this exhibit your sworn testimony in this matter?
Yes, it is.
If I asked you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would be the same.
And are your answers true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
At this time, staff moves to admit Exhibit Number 1, the testimony of Olafinso. Sorry, I'm mixed up your names. I apologize.
Okay. Let's see. SBI Broadband, any objection to the admission of Staff Exhibit 1?
No objection.
Okay. With that, Staff's Exhibit 1 is admitted into the record.
I have no further questions for this witness. I tender him for cross and further questioning. Thank you.
Excellent. Before we do that, Mr. Olafinso, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Olafinso. Okay, that's, as a crying camp, it's important for me to get last name pronunciation correct. So I appreciate that. Let's see, SBI Broadband, will it be Mr. Padilla or Ms. Ives doing the cross?
SBI Broadband does not have a cross-examination of Mr. Olafinso.
Oh, okay. Well, easy enough then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see. So, hearing examiner Ryan and I conferred beforehand. I think it's my turn to ask the first question on this witness. So, good morning, Mr. Olafinso.
Good morning.
Let me see. So I have a fair number of questions for you, but let me start just by, I did notice in your testimony, I think this is the first time you've testified before the commission. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Well, welcome to you. Can you tell us just a little bit about your professional background? I think you said you were an economist.
Yes. I have a master's in economics at the University of New Mexico. Currently, I am on my PhD program. I'm hoping to defend my dissertation in about a couple of months. I'm hoping weeks, but could be some months from now. I was employed in 2022, November, to the commission. And before then, I've worked as teaching assistant, research assistant, program coordinator, and yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. And let me ask just as a broad question, just about your testimony. Can I ask what you reviewed when you were preparing your testimony?
I reviewed the application SBI broadband application, the second amendment. Amended application, I reviewed the testimony, the direct testimony of Mr. Tully. I reviewed the financial statements and the tariff, the initial tariff, the local exchange tariff that was provided. And before that, I've also asked a series of questions, and which I got response from XBI Broadband, and I reviewed those responses also.
Okay. And I mean, before I sort of dive into the specifics, I did have a question. Just, I mean, one of the items that I mean, the reason why SBI ended up filing rebuttal testimony is because you had identified several questions that staff still had about their petition. Have you had a chance to review that rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And I assume that, is it fair to assume that staff's concerns or questions have been addressed at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
It has been addressed.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So let me start then sort of big picture and just ask. So I think the overall recommendation, I think, of your testimony, staff has testified that this ETC designation is in the public interest. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then I take it then that you recommend that the petition be granted by the commission. Is that also correct?
That would be my recommendation. Yes.
Okay. So I think at sort of a broad picture, we talked a little bit with Mr. Turley about sort of some of the factors that the commission looks at in terms of trying to determine if it's the public interest, if granting an ETC designation is in the public interest. But can you tell us why, in staff's view, this ETC designation is in the public interest?
Well, first is that granting the ETC designation to SBI Broadband will bring about competition, more competition. So in the market, when we have more competition, when there are more suppliers, generally the price of each product is gonna will reduce because we have more suppliers, and the equilibrium price I'm sorry, talking in economics term now, but the market price will drop. So competition, a fair competition, I would say, is good for the market. In this case, the telecom industry and telecom market in New Mexico. So that would be number one. And the second one is that it will give, which is also related to competition. It will give the citizens and residents of New Mexico better, more options for telecom services and packages which they could choose from. So, with these 2 points, I believe granting them the ETC designation should be in the public best interest, because the public will have more access to broadband and to telecom services, and also tentatively, and also is supposed to bring down the prices of each of the supplied services and products.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, I'm going to ask you a similar question to the one that I asked Mr. Turley. You spoke to the increase in competition that would come from granting another ETC designation, and so then the question becomes, for me anyway, what are the current competitors in the market, or what are the current market participants, right? So I guess let me ask first, do you know how many ETCs are currently designated in the northwest quadrant of the state, which is where SBI Broadband says they'll first sort of start to roll out their services?
I do not have the total list of the ETC companies, carriers. But I have a very few lists. We have Windstream, we have Yoka, and I think Baca Valley is also among a number of them concentrated or are doing business in that in the Four Corners.
Okay.
But yeah, I do not have a complete list of that, and we can look it up if needed. But there are a number of them.
Okay. Does the Telecommunications Bureau, do you maintain like a list of that information? I mean, are you able to ascertain that?
Yes, we do maintain a list of ETC carriers in the States.
Okay.
And actually, I do personally work on ETC designation every year, annual designation. So yes, we do as a bureau.
Okay. I would be curious to know that, just to put some context. When Hearing Examiner Ryan and I sit down to actually draft a recommended decision, that would be a question that I would anticipate that the commission would have, just in terms of what that market actually looks like. I'll pose it as a bench request, I guess, to staff, Mr. Rossi, just for not necessarily. Well, let me ask for, I guess, the number of other ETC designations in the current service territory of SBI, who those are, and then that same information for the proposed service area that that SBI Broadband is asking for. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Rossi?
Within this, yes, that makes sense, but one clarification. Within this, they are asking for statewide, but they focus in the northwest corner. Do you want the entire statewide list or only the northwest corner?
Well, yeah, so there's essentially two sort of geographic areas, I guess, or service territories that we'd be looking for the information for. One would be the current service territory of SBI, which is that northwest corner of the state. And then second, it would be the whole state minus what they've already testified to earlier today, the Mescalero Apache. I forget what the what the zip code is there. So essentially, what does that market look like? Because again, I do anticipate that would be a question that the commission would have. And I guess what I would ask you to do is before you file that into the record, to provide a copy of that over to SBI Broadband so that they can at least take a look at that. And if they want to object to that in any way, they can.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add to that. I mean, part of what we've heard is, in effect, that SBI believes it has sort of unique service offerings that are going to bring benefit. Mr. Olafinzau described the process by which introducing that unique service product is going to reduce prices. So as you're formulating answers, my suggestion would be that you provide as much granularity as you can, right? What will be helpful to the commissioners will be, they're going to come to a place, they have competitors, but the competitors don't offer X, Y, or Z. They do. That's a good thing. Or alternatively, competitors offer the exact same product, but because we think that having it more participants is going to be a benefit, this is likely to reduce costs, as Mr. Olafinzau said. And then the basis for the determination that it's likely to reduce costs. As a general matter, I understand the economics functions that as the supply curve goes, well, what would it be? As the supply curve goes up, the price should go down. And I think that's a generally true statement. But more granularly, why does staff believe that? It's specifically as to this case.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so I think that's what Hearing Examiner Ryan is expressing, just about testimony more generally. That's not the bench request. The bench request is just that data.
Well, and I would submit, but yeah, and the data is fine, but as to the extent to which you're formulating data, I mean, I think we have to have a basis to say that the things that we're hearing are true. And if we don't have a very detailed description, we just have basically the statement, we believe this to be true. Well, why do we believe this to be true?
Now, Mr. Olafinsa, so we've talked, that will provide us, I think, the data. Let me ask you just a little bit about, I think, from a conceptual level, the issue of customer choice. I'm looking in particular at page 15 to 16 of your testimony. So this is Staff Exhibit 1. You talk a little bit about likely to result, that granting the ETC designation is likely to result in more customer choice. And that is one of those criteria that, not really a criteria, but one of the most important factors that the commission considers in determining whether or not an ETC designation is in the public interest. And it just occurs to me when I look at that, at least on a conceptual level, is granting an ETC designation seems like almost by definition would result in more customer choice, because you're bringing in a new market participant that you wouldn't otherwise have. Does staff have, I guess, an opinion on when the commission approaches this question of whether or not granting the ETC designation is going to result in more customer choice? I guess, how should the commission interpret that question?
I am trying to, so you're asking about question on page 15 to 16?
Yes.
Was it there?
I mean, essentially the question is, what does more customer choice mean to staff, in this case, Telecommunications Bureau?
Okay, yeah, okay. I think the meaning of that is that there will be more telecommunication companies, and definitely there will also be more services, more similar services that that customers could access. So they have more choice. They have more products and more companies to move to in between, if there are if they want, like, if they are if they are currently with one telecommunication service, and if there is a new one coming in, and now they have one more choice, and they can choose in between the providers that are operating in their region. So
So
yeah.
Mr. Alfonso, if I could just follow up on some of the things you just said there, and I think I just want to make sure we go slow throughout all of this. Do we have some indication that there's an unmet need that exists within that area? Do you have that?
I do not currently have an indication about that.
Do you know that whether or not the unique services that SBI has indicated throughout the course of this proceeding that it can offer, is there a shortage of that specific need? And I believe the answer to the question was, their commitment to fiber optic and moving in that trajectory. Do you have any idea as to what is the shortage of that, or what is the scale of the need?
I do not have the correct information to that. If the unique services if there's a shortage of the services, right? I'm not so sure about that.
Hearing examiner Ryan, do you have any follow-up on that question?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So then, Mr. Olafinsa, let me ask you a different question. One of the subjects that was brought up, during the testimony, Mr. Turley and Ms. Ives had a helpful line of questioning about SBI, the parent company, their track record. And that was going to be one of my main questions to staff. We've heard from Mr. Turley that, about that background. Does staff, are you able to speak to SBI, again, the parent company, their track record in New Mexico?
I believe XBI, the parent company, has had cordial relationship with the with the commission over the years, and um, over the years without I don't believe, and I've been only been employed, but we have a bureau chief here also, but we have not had any issues with XBI, either broadband or the parent company over the years. I think since 2008 they have been working on the broadband program and the build outs and every other thing with the commission. The relationship has been cordial to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
And but can I just follow up on that? So we heard from
Please.
Mr. Turley that they operate in a variety of jurisdictions. Has staff been tracking whether or not SBI has received complaints in other commissions?
No, we do not track that information.
Did staff, and I would assume that means you don't track the information as to whether there's been any federal, and not tracking and local, but just in preparation for this case, that was not something that staff investigated.
We are not aware of any complaint or any case that SBI parent company or broadband may have with any entity. No, we are not aware about that.
When staff saw the bench request order in response to say that, effectively SBI Broadband was going to be a new entity and therefore there are by definition no complaints against a new entity, was staff satisfied by that response?
Yes.
Why was staff satisfied?
The new entity?
Yeah.
Because they are new entity and they have not begin operation. So I believe if there is no customer, there should not be any complaint. And I think that's one reason we had the question earlier today about if they have begin services in any other places. But yeah, we believe that statement is true, that there is no complaint because they are new and they have not begin any operation. So I don't think there should be any complaint without operation.
Was there ever a complaint filed of any kind against Smith Bagley Incorporated?
I am not aware of that.
Are you not aware because you don't know, or not aware because it's unknowable?
I am not aware because I do not know.
Mr. Olafinsa, let me ask you, so we talked a little bit about consumer choice. The other criteria, and Mr. Turley spoke at length about this, was one of the factors that the commission looks to determine if ETC designation is in the public interest is the unique advantages or disadvantages of the services being provided. And you speak to this on pages 17 to 18. And I just want to ask you that same question. What are the unique advantages and disadvantages potentially of SBI's service offerings?
Sorry, can you give me a minute to go
Yes,
through
absolutely. It's on pages 17 to 18. And for the record, this is Staff's Exhibit 1.
So I believe my response to that was based on the 25 years of history that they have been providing communication services in remote areas in New Mexico and also in tribal lands. So they do provide, I believe, they do provide the management profile where the management profile of the parent company end up and also the previous formal letters they have gotten from tribal lands. And I think that's one also reason we asked them again today if they have updated letters from tribal governments. We believe those two things demonstrate their with their cordial relationship with the commission, of course, and with staff. We believe those provide advantages for them. There is no disadvantages for the service offering that I am aware of right now.
That's a
Okay.
follow-up question, hearing examiner, unless you want to finish whatever if you have.
Well, I was just going to I will defer to you just in 1 second, hearing examiner
Sure.
Ryan. But that
Yep.
that last statement was one of the questions that I had, Mr. Oliphintzow, because I noted in your testimony that you said about the disadvantages. You said Mr. Turley said that SBI Broadband is not aware of any disadvantages of its service offering, and that confused me because I know that that's what Mr. Turley says. I wouldn't expect him to say anything different, but from staff, I was more trying to figure out if staff was aware of any unique disadvantages. And so what I've heard you testify is that staff is not aware of any disadvantages that would factor into that calculation. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And sorry, hearing examiner Ryan.
No, that's fine. And it's the same line of questioning. So what is the total population of customers that we're looking at up there in that service territory?
I do not have an estimate for that right now.
So to the extent to which the position of SBI is that there is this underserved population and that they are going to be uniquely positioned to serve that population. I mean, how can the commission be, apart from the I mean, I guess that's the question, is ultimately is how do we verify that? And it seems one answer would be to actually figure out what is the total population base, how many of them are underserved at this juncture, what does that demographic look like, how do we make outreach to them? Does SBI's services seem to point in the direction that they'll achieve that? Do we know the answers to any of those questions? I mean, from staff's perspective.
Right now, we do not. We can definitely do research, and I believe I don't know, probably Mr. Tully talked about the Office of the Broadband and Equal Access. We can definitely get the map and see what area is being underserved and unserved, and provide that information. But right now, I do not have the estimate for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Oliphintzow, I think I've gotten through most of my questions. I did just have a couple of questions. The phrasing of some of the questions that you were asked in your testimony, I found a little bit confusing. And I think, like, as an example here, on page 8 of your testimony, this is Staff Exhibit 1. At the bottom of page 8, and your answer is on page 9, you're asked this question about whether the direct testimony of Mr. Turley attests to the demonstration that SBI Broadband meets the requirements of Section 214, subsection E of the Federal Act, to be designated as a federal ETC. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So staff's position is that they have satisfied that, correct? Those requirements, and you outlined them on page 9, that they're going to provide voice grade access to the public switch network or its functional equivalent, et cetera. Staff is satisfied that those requirements have been satisfied.
That's correct.
Okay. And just going through my questions, bear with me. I think I've asked most of them. Oh, I mean, there is this remaining question, and Mr. Turley addressed this and at some length, both from questions from the hearing examiners and then also from Ms. Ives. There is this question that I have that's sort of unresolved a little bit about the services being provided throughout the designated service territory, right? And you're, I'm sure, aware of the question and where it comes from, that the designated service territory that SBI Broadband would be receiving would be the totality of the state minus the essentially the Mescalero Apache Reservation, and then they would begin by providing services up in the Northwest Quadrant. And there's this question of essentially, is that going to be rolled out in a reasonable time frame? Do you have an opinion on that? Does staff have a perspective on whether that's an issue that needs to be scrutinized by the hearing examiners?
No, I do not. Actually, we also have asked them this question and earlier on, and they were able to explain what the process, I mean, exactly what was explained at this hearing. So we do not have an opposition to that right now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, hearing examiner Ryan, I believe that's all the questions I have at this time, but thank you, Mr. Olafensau, for your testimony. It's been very helpful. Anything further, hearing examiner Ryan?
Yeah, just a few questions. So,
Please.
Mr. Olafensau, at page 13, you write, SBI Broadband has a management team with a proven 25-year history. When you wrote the words proven 25-year history, what was the basis for the conclusion that it was a proven 25-year history? I mean, what is it that I can look to know that that's correct?
I would say the profile they have provided and communication rapport with the commission over the years. The business now, okay. The parent company has been existent for about 31 years, and I think this show some, I don't want to say assertively, but shows some good management practices over the years.
Was there any data points that you looked to determine that that is a proven 25-year history? I mean, how would one assess that? I mean, I understand the interaction between the commission, but for instance, like metrics that we would utilize to say, well, they've strived to do this and this is what they've achieved, and therefore they're a successful business. Do we have any empirical basis to say that there is a proven 25-year history?
There are no empirical or quantitative data to express that. To the best of my knowledge.
But the part of the service here will be with the tribal entities in the Four Corners area. Did staff communicate at all with any of the tribal entities about their understanding or experience of working with SBI?
I'm sorry. Well, is the question, did staff communicate with the tribal lands, the tribal governments?
Yeah. So tribal governments. So there's been several attachments to the varying filings in this case, and the basic claim is, well, SBI has had a really positive working relationship with varying tribal governments. Did staff independently verify that?
I don't believe we independently verified that in this case, but I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We believe, and that's my belief, that tribal government is aware. I believe they are also, and I may have to double check this, they are in the service list in this case, and we believe they are aware that this case is going on. But we do not I do not independently, regarding this case, reach out to tribal governments to verify any of the SBI claim, but we believe that they are also involved in service list, and they are aware of it.
So I guess I think at a broad level, when I read your testimony, Mr. Olafensau, was, most of the references when you talk about specific aspects of the application, you point to Mr. Turley's statements on the subject. And while I can understand that's a understandable thing to do, at the same time, I mean, the question that I kept asking myself is, well, we understand what the applicant thinks, but how will the commission itself come to some view of the subject that is independent of the applicant's positions? And I mean, I'll just use a very specific example. Just give me a minute. Right. So in the response to the question, does the direct testimony of Guy Turley address the unique advantages and disadvantages of the petitioner's service offering? You conclude at page 18 of 24, at lines 8 to 9, Mr. Turley said that SBI Broadband is not aware of any advantages of its service offering. I mean, it strikes me as sort of self-evident that Mr. Turley would have that factual perspective, and I think the question would be, does staff agree? And I suppose part of what I'm reading the testimony, and you can tell me if I'm correct or not to read it this way, is that, staff's position in this case is really that there is no evidence which suggests that SBI Broadband should not be given approval because SBI Broadband did not bring that to the attention of the commission. I mean, would that be a fair assessment of this testimony, that we would only know if there's a problem if SBI Broadband told us?
Well, we'll know if we are aware of it. Either SBI Broadband brings it to our attention, or some other parties, interveners, or brings it to our attention. So we are not aware because it wasn't brought to our attention.
Right. And I think the question I'm trying to ask you is, is there a way, what is staff's position on, will there be a disadvantage to the service offering? And I can appreciate that Mr. Turley believes there is no disadvantage, and I'm not suggesting there must be one, but does staff, independent of what Mr. Turley believes, think that there are any potential disadvantages of the service offering?
No, we do not believe that there is any potential disadvantage of the services to be offered.
And that conclusion's predicated upon what evidence?
Based on the application, the testimony, the documents we have reviewed, other documents we have reviewed, including the financials and the tariff, and their response to our questions since this case has started.
That's all the questions I have. Hearing Examiner Cronenkamp, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, that brings us to Mr. Rossi. Any questions on redirect, sir?
Yes, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I do have a couple questions on redirect.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello again, Mr. Olafensau. SBI, the parent company, have they been participating in the Commission's broadband program run by Mr. Evans since at least 2018?
Yes, they have.
Are you familiar at all with that program? Have you discussed that with Mr. Evans?
Yes, I have.
And how have they been doing in that program?
They have been very cooperative and very successful in the program.
So is it fair to say they have a long track record working with the Commission? Now, specifically, this is SBI, the parent company, not yet SBI Broadband. Have they had a long track record of working with the Commission through Mr. Evans' program?
Yes, they have.
Now, when it comes to SBI Broadband cases and SBI cases, there's not just this case. Do you have another SBI case?
I have, yes, I do.
And what is that one?
is SBI Broadband select case, so competitive local exchange carrier to become a local exchange carrier.
Are there any other SBI cases open?
Apart from these two that we mentioned, I'm not aware of any other ones.
Are there any complaint cases that you're aware of?
No.
Okay. So in your understanding, they have a track record going back at least through 2018 through the current commission staff. Do you agree with that?
I do.
And you're not aware of any issues that have come up through those programs or those cases. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't have any further redirect for this witness. Thank you.
You're on mute, Commissioner, or hearing examiner.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Let's see. I was turning to Mr. Padilla or Ms. Ives. Any questions? Any final questions for Mr. Oliphant-Sao?
I'll defer to Ms. Ives on that.
Okay.
No, sir. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's anything further, hearing examiner Ryan, I think thank you. Okay, thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Oliphant-Sao. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Cryenkamp, but I just thought of something. I apologize. If I'm too late, I'm too late. But if I just have one question. Okay, thank you.
He's still on the line, Mr. Oliphant-Sao. I'm gonna sort of recall you, even though you're still here.
I apologize.
No, you're fine. You're still under oath, Mr. Oliphant-Sao, just reminding you. Please go ahead, Ms. Ives.
Thank you. Mr. Oliphant-Sao, if there were complaints about Smith Bagley at the commission, would you be aware of those?
If there were formal complaints, I will be aware of those.
Okay. If there were complaints by staff or the commission against SBI, would you know about that?
Yes, I believe.
And you are not aware of any complaints from anyone, is that correct?
No, I am not aware.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cryenkamp.
Thank you, Ms. Ives. That's helpful. Mr. Rossi, it's your witness. Do you have any follow-up questions just based on that?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Oliphant-Sao, thank you again for your testimony. We appreciate it. And you can be excused, sir. Okay, so we've gotten through the witnesses. We still need to address the confidential Exhibit 5 and potentially subjects to brief. Hearing examiner Ryan, do you want to just press on ahead? Do you want to take a minute to confer? How do you want to handle that?
I think we need to just look at the document itself, and then technically, as you read earlier at the beginning of the proceeding, you would file the document and then a brief explaining why the information should be kept confidential. We would at this juncture have to infer all of that. I don't think we need to have oral argument. And I don't know how we go about making that determination absent some statement from the applicant, like this is why this information should be deemed confidential. I think we have to have that filing.
Yeah, I mean, I should clarify. What I meant was we need to address that issue with Exhibit 5, and then I was referring to briefing just in the context of overall legal briefs in the case, post-hearing briefs, in other words.
Yeah, I think the rule. I mean, my view would be on that is just the time frame set out in the commission's procedural rules should dictate that. Parties can supply whatever, and then to the extent what you're asking too about, there are specific things we would like answered. That's like a separate whole set of questions.
Yes. Do you want to take a minute to discuss that, or are you comfortable just doing that?
You can just do it on the fly. I think it's fine. So.
Okay. So let's see. So let's deal with Exhibit 5 first, and then we'll deal with briefing afterwards. Mr. Padilla, Ms. Ives, does SBI want to move that into that Exhibit 5? Did you discuss that? I'm assuming you discussed it. Do you want to move that into the record?
Yes, we would like to move Exhibit 5 into the record pending the briefing as discussed.
Okay. So then, so then here's what we'll do. So we'll consider that offered into evidence. Mr. Rossi, any objection to the admission of that document pending, again, the ruling on confidentiality?
No objection. Thank you.
Okay. So what we'll do then is we'll reserve a ruling on that, on the admission of that exhibit. And what we will have you do then is take a look at paragraph K, ordering paragraph K of the protective order. What you'll need to do is submit, I think, an affidavit and a brief setting forth the reasons for confidentiality. Staff then files a response saying whether it believes it's confidential, and then hearing examiner Ryan and I will issue a ruling. As part of that ruling, we will add in a ruling about the admissibility component of that. Is that?
Yeah, that's so I was just going to add, look, when you're thinking about the scope of that task, this is not something that needs to be War and Peace, right? This is, in some ways, if we get an IPRA request and say, hey, we want to see all these documents, the person who would like, we won't disclose that. Why? Because it's confidential. And why is it confidential, right? There has to be some basic explanation. So that's all that's necessary. And if staff's position is that it is fine being confidential, then that's all that needs to be said too. So this isn't an enormous exercise.
Yes. Any questions or concerns about that?
No, I believe we have a good guidance as to how to proceed, and we'll get to the briefing on that as soon as possible.
Okay, sounds good. Do we need to set a deadline for that?
I don't. I mean, it sounds like you'll all move forward with, okay, good
Very
speed.
quickly.
Yes.
Okay.
Reasonable speed.
Well, there's you guys are the ones driving the bus. When you have a case where there's no time limitations, that's really falls on the applicant to kind of keep it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So that takes care of Exhibit 5 for now. And the other note. So let's talk a little bit about briefing. This is legal briefing, not about Exhibit 5, but briefs about the case. I guess let's talk first about the issues. So obviously you can brief any issues that you'd like. No worries there. The one thing I would like a little bit of legal briefing on, and I think the testimony was very helpful in that regard today, but again, this just issue of the designated service area that we've talked a little bit about, just the law there. The testimony was very helpful today. I do feel better about it just based on the testimony, but I would like to see a little bit of legal briefing on that. Hearing examiner Ryan, any other issues that you feel the need to receive briefing on?
No, and I think the question sort of can illuminate. I mean, I think part of my understanding is the one big concern or consideration in all of this is just if you allow the market entrant, what is the likely outcome of that? And so that's kind of like a very generalized assessment of a sort of probably very complex set of laws. So I think to the extent to which you can unpack that and make clear to us, hey, here are the steps between the Universal Rules Service Fund and the ETC designation. Here's how that plays out in terms of like what the commission must consider as a matter of law, and then whatever policies get built into that. That would be very helpful for us, I think, or at least for me, for sure. And without giving more specific guidance, I can't. I mean, I would need you guys to give a little direction on the law. That's what I'm asking for.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously is not the only subject that you should brief. So brief whatever issues you feel are appropriate, including the fundamental issues of the case. And in a case like this where the law, frankly, is a little bit dense and it's outside the Public Utility Act, I think that's going to be particularly important. So in terms of deadlines for briefing, the default deadlines in our rules, 20 days after the filing of the transcript for initial briefs, and then another 13 days for the response briefs. Are those deadlines, the default deadlines, are those acceptable to the parties? Do you need more time, less time? Mr. Padilla, Ms. Ives, any thoughts on that from SBI Broadband's perspective?
I think we are fine with those deadlines. You actually preempted one of my questions. I was wondering when the transcript might be available.
I don't think this is a case. That's an excellent question, Ms. Ives. I don't think this is a case when where we've requested an expedited transcript. So I think the general rule is, I think, 10 days, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Ryan, hearing examiner Ryan.
And
Yeah.
Mr. Lee that's the time he's allotted, but often with a hearing that goes relatively short. I mean, we can't ask Mr. Lee to do it, but my experience has been that he always works as diligently as he can.
Yeah, so so once the transcript is filed, then you would have, then the deadlines would kick off.
Right.
And Mr. Rossi, that okay with you?
While that's okay with me, I'm not expecting in this matter for the responses to be difficult or lengthy. Therefore, actually, what I would ask for, because especially that last issue that was brought up by hearing examiner Ryan, that's going to require a little bit of research, especially on my part. And therefore, I think what I'd ask for is, would it be possible to have the initial briefs due a little bit later than 20 days and then less time on the response? So
Ms. Ives, Mr. Padilla, any thoughts about that?
I don't well, I don't think we have any problem with that, but along those lines, because I want to make sure that we are understanding the questions and satisfying the hearing examiner's issues and addressing them appropriately. I'm wondering if it would be possible to get some kind of a post-hearing order from the hearing examiners saying, we want you to address these specific questions. And I don't think we have a problem with what Mr. Rossi has requested.
Sure, that's fine. I think that's fair. We can get that. We can get an order out. Just describing
Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, not today, but yeah, Monday or Tuesday. Yes, we can get that out to you.
That
Absolutely.
Works. And I had one more question, if I could.
Yes.
I know you've talked about legal briefs. In the past, we've submitted proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law. Is that how you want us to do it, or do you actually want just briefs?
No, but I'm glad that you asked that question, Ms. Ives, because in hearing examiner Ryan and I have talked about this ad nauseum. But so in terms of the briefs, so the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law, that's not an issue. We take care of that on our end as we draft the recommended decision. But I do just want to flag, just in terms of what we're looking for with respect to briefing. Legal briefing is different than testimony, right? So what we're looking for is citations and directions to applicable, and especially in this context, the applicable federal regulations, federal statutes, any case law, administrative decisions, precedent. It's not intended to be, and it shouldn't be, just a summary of the testimony in the record, right? So it should be, legal briefing. And in the past, in cases, hearing examiner Ryan and I have talked about that. Sometimes that distinction between a summary of testimony and legal briefing has sometimes gotten a little bit blurred. But when we ask for legal briefing, we are asking for authority to help us wade through the law on this.
Yes.
So this is your opportunity to argue the law.
Now, one of the things, this came up, for instance, I remember Ms. Stevens in an EPE case once was describing the process of, commission writing, both recommended decisions, final orders, briefing. And she noted that there's a lot of summary that goes on. I think as the commission professionalizes, you can just assume that we have read the testimony, we are familiar with the legal principles, and that your task is then to unpack that facts and imply them on some more granular level as to here's what the legal requirements are, and here's what we think is the best optimal outcome.
Sure.
As both a matter of fact and law. And I'm not trying to lecture anybody here, but if you look at RDs, a lot of times what you're going to find is hundreds of pages of summary. We can all read. Really, I don't understand how we ended up in a world in which, the actual exercise of legal judgment is sort of transformed into, let me state for you what facts were presented. That's just the discipline of reading. So I think as an agency, we have failed in that capacity to really make the work product about advancing thought into complex principles of law and fact and understanding them in a way that is going to advance the knowledge of the commission as an entire whole. So that's what Mr. Krankamp is referring to.
Understood.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's everything that I have. Hearing examiner Ryan, any final items to address while we're on the record? No. Okay. So to the parties then, SBI Broadband, any final items that we should address while we're on the record?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, sounds good. And Mr. Rossi, same question to you, sir.
No, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Please accept our sincere thanks to both parties and both witnesses, Mr. Turley, Mr. Olafinsow, for your participation and professionalism today. We have appreciated it, learned a lot, and with that, this hearing is adjourned and we are off the record.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiners. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Lee. Appreciate your help today, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.